Hello everybody, so welcome back to the study of After Death by Léon Denis. As you remember, the first time we met, an introduction was given to you about the book itself, and now we're going to start it by part 1, that is called Beliefs and Denials. And what will Denis do in this part of the book over here? Well, first thing he's going to do is he's going to ask us to change old beliefs. And what does it mean, changing old beliefs? Well, first of all, it means that we cannot think, we should not think, in fact, that our religion, that our thoughts, that our beliefs, in fact, they are better and they are superior to all the others from the past. No, that's exactly what he's doing here. He's telling us, well, if you think nowadays you know a lot, if you think you know much more and you are much better than all those people over there who lived in ancient times, well, you'd better change your mind, because that's not true. And why is it so? First of all, later on in the book, in the other chapters, he's going to be talking about all these religions separately. But here in the first part, he's going to do what? He's going just to do it globally. So let's say, for example, the first one over here, you have the Egyptian religion, the ancient Egyptian religion. So why can you think, for example, that just because they had many gods, or just because they're gods, like for example here you have Thoth, why do you have to think that they were silly, that they were nothing but a silly thing, a silly belief? No, there were many symbols over here, many metaphors behind everything. Or if you consider, for example, the Aztec religion, the very same thing. They had many gods, but it does not mean that they didn't know the truth. And the Greek one over here, the very same thing. Why should we think that nowadays we are much better than the Greeks or the Aztecs or the ancient Egyptians? Just because we have a different set of beliefs. That's exactly what Denis is going to tell us here in this part of the book. Then, well, let's take a look now at the second paragraph of this chapter that is called The Secret Doctrine. At first look, a superficial comparison of the beliefs and superstitions of the past leads us inevitably to doubt. But when the outside and shiny veil that hid the great mysteries from the crowd is pushed aside, when one penetrates the sanctuary of the religious idea, one becomes aware of a fact that has considerable significance. So what does it mean here, for example? It means that if you just take a look at the very first look, if you just look at the thing and say, well, that's what it is, superstition and nothing else. No, we should not do that. Then he goes on. The purpose of the material forms and of the worship ceremonies was to cause a deep impression on people's imagination. So all the cults you had in the past, where it was something grand over there in the temples and so on. Why was it that way? It was just to cause a deep impression on people's imagination. And why was it so? Because there were so many things behind all that. There were so many things behind those gods, there were so many symbols, so many metaphors, that it was really hard for the lay people, for people in general, to grasp that meaning. So, you see, you had the purpose of the material forms and of the worship ceremonies was to cause deep impression on people's imagination. Why? Because then they would be awed and say, wow, look, that's the God that I worship. Because there were many and many things that only initiates, only the priests of that cult would know for sure. Here we have to think about something. For example, you see, in the beginning of the first century, not the beginning, but let's say when Christianity was forbidden in the Roman Empire, before Christianity became the religion, the official religion of the Roman Empire. You see, many people, not only Romans, but many people over there, they really imagined what? That Christians, they ate human flesh and they drank human blood. And why was it so? Well, because as you know, Christians worshiped Christ how? By drinking his blood and by eating his flesh. And then, well, fake news. As you can see, fake news is not something from our time. It has always existed anyway. But anyway, here, what people thought, well, these Christians are horrible. These Christians are, well, they are terrible people, because you see, they eat human flesh and they drink human blood. How horrible. They are monsters. They, how bizarre they are. That's something they thought. And why so? Because that ceremony that was not known by the people, it was, let's say, faced with disbelief, was faced with awe and saying, how is it possible? Because you just hear, oh, okay, they drink the blood of Christ. So if they drink the blood of Christ, then there must be real blood, and so on. So that's exactly what Denis is explaining here in this part. Then we have another thing. Behind these veils, the ancient religions appeared in a totally different light. They assumed elevated and grave features at the same time of scientific and philosophical nature. So, if you go deep inside the myths, if you try and find the symbols hidden over there, what happens? If you lift the veil, what are you going to find? You will find lots of things. You will find scientific truths. You will find philosophical truths. And why is it so? Because they are hidden. They are there, under the veil, let's say. And that's exactly what we have to do. That's what Denis is telling us here in this chapter. He's saying, well, come on, do not just look at them, look down on those religions, look down on those people. No, you have to think, no, there is something over there. There is some truth over there. And then he goes on. Their teachings were twofold, outward bound and public on one hand, and inward and secret on the other, in which case they were reserved exclusively to the initiates. So what happens over here? So all their teachings were twofold. You had something public and something secret. So what was public? For example, the public part of everything was for the people, and they did not understand everything. And why not? Well, just because they were not ready to understand everything. They were not ready for that. And the secret part was what? The secret part, let's say, was the part that the priests knew and the initiates knew over there. Exclusively, they were the only ones who got to know that, who grasped all that. Then you have material symbols dissimulated the deeper meaning. So all these symbols, they dissimulated the deeper meaning of everything. So here, let's take a look, for example, at two things here, two myths. First of all, we have Eden here, with Adam and Eve, and the serpent, and the tree. Well, first of all, if you just think about this story, and you say, well, it's a nice story, or it's a silly story. Oh, come on, how is it possible to believe it? Come on, a couple living in a garden, and they couldn't eat fruit, whatever. Well, if you just look at the story like that, it is just a fable and nothing else. But if you try and find the symbols, if you try and find all the metaphors hidden inside this symbol, hidden inside this myth over here, you can find there is much, much more. First of all, let's think about the apples. That they were not apples, in fact, because in the Hebrew Bible, it was just called fruit. Just the fruit, anyway. But you see, it's interesting when you think about the translation from Hebrew into Latin of the Bible. What happened? They decided to use for the name of the fruit in Latin, malum. And malum is apple. That's all right. But malum was not only apple at that time. Malum was also any kind of fruit, any fruit with seed, any fruit with seeds. They were called malum. So malum was an apple, and also malum was any other fruit. For example, if you wanted to say a pomegranate in Latin, you would have to say malum punicum, for example. If you had to say quince in Latin, you would have to say malum aureum, let's say the yellow fruit, the golden fruit, and so on. So what happens here? So first of all, and also something else, malum in Latin also means evil, something bad. So you have all these ideas here in the fruit. Something else interesting, you have the tree. Trees are really powerful symbols that appeared throughout antiquity in many, many, many myths. So that's something else. And also we have the serpent over here. And also the serpent or the snake It was also a very powerful symbol in antiquity. First of all, because snakes, they shed their skin. And what happened over there? By shedding their skin, they leave their old skin behind and they get a brand new skin. And what does it mean? It is something like resurrection. So snakes, they get resurrected. They leave their old bodies behind and they start anew their lives, for example. And also in many, many myths, in many cosmogonic myths from the past, from the ancient times, the snake was present. Something very interesting to think about is the following. You see that in ancient Egypt, the serpent was a positive symbol when erect, but a negative symbol when horizontal. And let's imagine something. When God told the serpent, from now on you will crawl. Why did God say that to the serpent? Well, if he said, from now on you will crawl, it is because the serpent did not crawl. The serpent was erect. So it's truly interesting if you think about it. Something else to think is the following. Snakes were serpents or snakes. They were something really present everywhere. So even in the Bible, if you take a look, for example, at Exodus, you see Moses and Aaron, they wield staffs that turn into serpents in Exodus. And there is also the bronze serpent of Moses that healed the Israelites in the wilderness. So again, you have serpents throughout antiquity, and they are powerful, and they are there. And also, you see, you have the Hermes had a staff, and there were snakes in his staff. Then, just to go over here, there is another picture. And in this picture here, it depicts a Greek vase. And here what happens? Here we have the Garden of the Hesperides. And in this Garden of the Hesperides, as you can see here, there is a tree. So there was a tree in the middle of the garden. In the center of the garden, there was a tree. And in this tree, you had golden apples over there. And who guarded, or what guarded these apples, these golden apples? A snake. Depending on the myth, it can be a snake or a dragon. Here, as we have the picture with a snake, let's skip the snake. That's the thing. So again, what happened? Again, you have another symbol here. There is another garden. And these apples, by the way, they were Hera's wedding gift by Gaia, who was the Earth Mother, and so on. So what happens here? Again, you have another myth where you have a tree and you have golden apples. And again, these apples could be any fruit. And the serpent was here guarding the apples. Why? Nobody could pick them up. And even though some people did that, for example, Hercules came and picked it up. Some for him no, because it was one of his works. And for example, also there is another story. It's a myth that what happened? Peleus and Thetis, they got married, and all the gods from Olympus, they were invited to the party, but Ares, the discord, was not invited. For obvious reasons, naturally. And what happened? Ares was so angry that he came over here to the Garden of the Hesperides, picked up a golden apple, and wrote over there on the apple, to the most beautiful goddess, and threw the golden apple over there in the party. You can imagine the uproar it caused. And Hera and Athena and Aphrodite, they were, let's say, they wanted the apple for themselves. And, well, but only one could have the apple. And then they called Paris to judge. And Paris gave the apple to Aphrodite because Aphrodite promised that she would give him the most beautiful woman on earth. And that woman was Helen, who was also the daughter of Zeus. And then what happened? So that was the beginning of the Trojan War. So as you can see, these apples, they were very important. And why? Because normally people who picked them up, they didn't use them correctly. They did things they shouldn't do with these golden apples. So as you can see here, you have two examples of garden, tree, let's say fruit, the important fruits, and snakes over here. Then let's go to another myth here. We have Prometheus. As you know, Prometheus was a titan. And he stole the fire from the gods in order to give it to the humans, to humanity. And why so? Because according to some myths, he was the one who created humanity. And he loved humanity very much. And what happened? As soon as it was found out. People know, but the gods discovered that he had stolen the fire. What happened? Well, he was sentenced to be at the top of Mount Caucasus, and every day, at the end of the day, depending on the myth, it can be an eagle or a vulture. It came and ate his liver up. And after the vulture or the eagle ate his liver up, the liver just grew back again. And every day it was the very same thing. And what happened? In Prometheus, he could foresee the future. So he knew exactly what would happen. So he knew that by stealing the fire, by robbing the fire from the gods and giving it to humans, he would suffer for, well, not for eternity, because Hercules set him free later on, but that's another story. But you see, it is a very good example, if you think about it, of an image of the Christ, because again, the same thing. He loved humanity so much that he didn't care whether he would suffer or not. No, I'm going to help them anyway. And in the depiction here of the vase, what you can see is what? You can see a snake right here, and this snake is erect. And there is no, you see, the snake is not part, the serpent is not a part of the myth. So what is the serpent doing here? So the person who drew these drawings over here on the vase, the person knew what the serpent meant, and that's why it is here. So as you can see, there are lots and lots of things, there are lots of symbols, there are lots of metaphors around that we should know better, that we should really know better before just looking down on them and saying they're silly, they're just silly fables and nothing but that. Then another thing here, let's take a look at Thoth. That is the Egyptian god of wisdom and the messenger of the gods and of the scribes. And again, here on the right, you have his counterpart, his Greek counterpart, that is Hermes. In fact, Hermes is Thoth, but in Greece, let's say. And what happens here? There are many symbols, of course. If you look at Thoth here and you just say, wow, come on, how silly. A god with the body of man and the head of an animal. Oh, that's impossible, come on, that's really silly. But that's not that silly if you think about it. If you really go deep inside and you try and find the symbol behind everything here. Well, his staff is a symbol. This cross that he holds in the other hand is a symbol. And let's imagine something here, for example. Let's imagine you are, let's say you are looking for wisdom, you are looking for knowledge, and you are on the beach. And each grain of sand that is there on that beach is a part of knowledge. And you don't want everything. You want to pick up just a part of this. You want to pick up a grain of sand. That specific knowledge is what you want. If you just say, well, I'm going to pick it up with my hand, you can't, because your hand is too big. How can you do that? You're going to pick up everything, and you're going to lose that knowledge that is just a grain of sand. Then you say, well, then I'll do something. I'll pick it up with my tongue. What happens if you do that with your tongue? A lot of grains of sand are going to come to your mouth, and you will lose that specific grain of sand that you want. But now let's think about Thoth with this, let's see, long and thin beak here. He can pick up exactly what he wants. He can select the knowledge he wants. So that's something interesting here if you think about this kind of symbol. So that's not, something, okay, oh, it has the head of an animal, the head of a bird, it's for nothing. No, it is not for nothing. There are symbols everywhere here, and you just have to try and see it. Anyway, then, if we go to the Spirit's book, for example, question number 626, you have here, Kardec asks, the spirits, was Jesus the only one who revealed divine or natural laws to us? Did human beings have no other knowledge than that provided by intuition before Jesus? And the spirits answered, did we not tell you that those laws are written everywhere? All the men and women who have meditated about wisdom have been able to understand and teach these laws since the dawn of time. And they go on later on. It has always been possible for humankind to know the divine laws by simply searching for them since they are written in the book of nature. So what do the spirits say here? They say, come on, see, you cannot think that before Jesus nobody knew anything. Knowledge was hidden. Nobody knew about it. Of course they did. You see, everywhere. It was, they say here, these laws were written everywhere. See, in those stories, in those myths, in those religions over there, you just have to search, you just have to go deep. You have to lift the veil, let's say, and you will find them anyway. Then there is another question, question 628 in the same book, the Spirit's book. And then Kardec asks again, why has the truth not been accessible to all in the past? Look that here, Kardec doesn't ask, why has the truth not been accessible in the past? He says, to all. And the spirits answer him, each thing must come in its own time. Truth is like light. You must adjust to it gradually, otherwise it dazzles you, it dazzles us. Regardless, humankind should study every old philosophy, tradition, or religion because they all contain the seeds of great truths. Although they may seem to contradict each other as they are misrepresented by worthless embellishments, today they are much easier to understand thanks to the key that Spiritism has provided. And when the spirits say here, for example, that they are misrepresented by worthless embellishments, what do they mean by this? It is, imagine, there were many ancient civilizations. Each one, well, they had their own religions. They had their own gods. And these were the embellishments. But even though all these things were different anyway, the truth was there. And why was the truth inside every one of them? As Denis says here in this part of the book, in this chapter, he says why? Because all these religions, they come from the same place. They come from the spiritual world. So the spirits have sent these religions. They have done everything. So it's not like, I know, man just created everything. Humans created everything. No. It was there. It came straight from the spiritual world. And then there is also Matthew 13. Jesus, well, is speaking in parables to people. And then the disciples came to him and asked, why do you speak to the people in parables? And he replied, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. And why has Jesus said that? Think about it. What is he saying here? He's saying, well, you have been walking around with me for a very long time. You have been listening to me for a very long time. So you must know, you must understand what I tell you, but they cannot do it. And let's be serious. Some disciples, they could not understand because, as you remember, they were speaking about the kingdom of heaven and so on. And then some of them did not understand exactly what Jesus was talking about. But anyway, and then you have here, this is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. So again you have here, it's a secret doctrine. So to the disciples, Jesus spoke what he had to speak because they could understand him. They were initiates in his teachings. But to the lay people, to everybody else, he could not. So he had to, let's say, oh, well, I have to use parables because otherwise they will not understand what I mean. And let's be serious. I really think that some people, when they heard these parables, I'm sure some of them, they thought, well, look, in fact, that character in that parable, that character must be something, there must be something different. And maybe some of these people, they could even grasp the meaning little by little. And why? By interpreting the parables, by trying to understand the symbols behind the parables, and so on. So basically, that's what Denis is saying here in this whole chapter. He's saying, look, what we are going to do here is, we are going to look deep inside all these ancient religions. And the first thing you have to do is what? You have to forget, you have to discard this silly thought that these ancient religions mean absolutely nothing. That these ancient religions, they are silly. They don't have anything, they don't have any truth, because they do have it. Their truth comes from the spirit world. And that's exactly what he's saying here. And that's what we are going to do next time we meet. We are going just to say, well, okay, so now let's start with everything and so on. So I really hope you have enjoyed it, and I wish to see you back again next time. So goodbye, my dear friends, and see you next time.